Good evening. What unfolded across Russia in the last 72 hours represents the most significant intelligence failure the West has experienced in decades. Not a single person saw this coming. Not the White House, not NATO headquarters in Brussels, not even the veteran Moscow watchers who've spent careers tracking the Kremlin's every move. Russia just executed a strategic maneuver so unexpected, so precisely calculated, that it's forced the Pentagon to throw out every assumption they had about Russian capabilities, and the implications? They're staggering. Let me walk you through what happened and why every major power in Europe is now scrambling to reassess the entire security architecture of the continent. This wasn't a symbolic gesture. This wasn't Putin rattling his saber for domestic consumption. What Russia just pulled off is a fundamental restructuring of the military balance in Europe. And the speed, the stealth, the operational discipline it required completely contradicts everything Western intelligence believed about Russia's current state. For weeks, something strange was happening deep inside Russia's classified military infrastructure. American intelligence officers monitoring satellite imagery started noticing anomalies, small things at first. Military installations that are normally static suddenly showing movement, rail lines transporting equipment from deep storage bunkers, thermal signatures indicating facilities operating at unusual hours. Individually, none of these meant much. Training exercises happen, equipment gets moved. But when you've studied Russian military patterns for as long as I have, you learn to recognize when something doesn't fit. This didn't fit. The data patterns didn't match seasonal drills. They didn't resemble previous mobilizations or standard troop rotations. Something was building beneath the surface, something big enough that Russia was going to extraordinary lengths to keep it hidden. Then, almost overnight, the picture became horrifyingly clear. Russia had repositioned a critical segment of its strategic deterrent forces into configurations that fundamentally alter the risk calculation for every NATO operation in Europe. These weren't the conventional systems grinding away in the Ukrainian battlefield. These are the crown jewels of Russia's arsenal, the weapons Moscow keeps hidden, brought out only during moments of existential crisis. Advanced mobile missile platforms designed specifically to hold NATO targets at risk, systems capable of reaching major European capitals, and they've been moved forward, positioned aggressively along Russia's western border, integrated into new command structures, and placed under alert protocols that go far beyond routine posturing. But here's what makes this truly alarming. Simultaneously, Russia dispersed other strategic assets across its vast interior, scattering them into remote regions where American satellites struggle to maintain accurate tracking. By projecting some forces forward while dispersing others backward, Moscow has created a nightmare scenario for Western intelligence. We can't accurately track their full capability anymore. We can't reliably target their systems. And we certainly can't predict with confidence how quickly they could escalate if pushed. This operational pattern, forward deployment combined with strategic dispersion, is one of the most threatening postures a nuclear power can adopt. It signals high readiness. It demonstrates meticulous planning. But most dangerously, it injects uncertainty into American strategic calculations at exactly the moment Washington believed it had Russia's capabilities fully mapped. From a realist perspective, this move makes perfect strategic sense. Russia believes it's fighting for survival. The Kremlin sees NATO expansion, Western sanctions, and military support for Ukraine as part of a coordinated campaign to permanently weaken Russian power. They view this not as a regional conflict, but as the culmination of 3 decades of Western encirclement dating back to the Soviet collapse. When a great power believes its survival is at stake, it stops playing by the old rules. It abandons predictability. It embraces the harsh logic of power politics and does whatever is necessary to change the strategic equation in its favor. That's exactly what we're witnessing. What shocks Western analysts isn't just what Russia moved, but how they moved it. For 2 years, the dominant narrative in Washington has been that Russia's military is exhausted, degraded by catastrophic losses in Ukraine, incapable of complex strategic operations. This maneuver proves that narrative was dangerously wrong. Yes, Russia's conventional forces have suffered terrible casualties, but its strategic forces, the systems designed specifically for confrontation with NATO, remain intact, mobile, and capable of rapid coordinated deployment. The Kremlin maintained absolute command integrity over the assets that actually matter for long term survival against the West. The moment American intelligence confirmed the full scope of this deployment, Washington shifted into crisis mode. The Pentagon demanded immediate revisions to all forward projections. The National Security Council held emergency sessions. Intelligence analysts started wargaming scenarios they haven't seriously considered since the early 2000s. NATO commanders along the eastern flank quietly elevated their alert status. Publicly, there was silence. But in great power politics, silence is often the loudest signal. Behind closed doors, American leadership understands the grim reality. Russia isn't posturing. Moscow is signaling that the rules of engagement have fundamentally changed. Washington's entire strategy was built on the assumption that Russia would remain bogged down in Ukraine, fighting a grinding conventional war of attrition. That assumption just shattered. Nobody anticipated a move that transcends the battlefield and projects directly into the broader strategic domain. Through this redeployment, the Kremlin is sending an unmistakable message to the White House. If you escalate in Ukraine, we escalate in theaters where your defenses are thin. If you apply pressure, we apply counter pressure. This is asymmetric deterrence, executed with a sophistication that leaves American policymakers with very few good options. The United States now faces a strategic nightmare. Washington can double down on supporting Ukraine, but that risks triggering Russian escalation beyond the battlefield. It can respond by repositioning American strategic forces, but that triggers an arms race spiral neither side can control. Or it can hesitate, which hands initiative to Moscow and undermines American credibility with European allies. There are no good choices here, only less catastrophic ones. This is the harsh structural reality of great power competition. The United States and Russia are locked in a zero-sum contest over European security architecture. And in any confrontation between nuclear powers, perception matters more than intention. Russia doesn't need to issue direct threats. It just needs to alter American perception of risk. And that's exactly what this move accomplished. Moscow has injected dangerous uncertainty about its pain threshold, the true readiness of its strategic forces, and how quickly it can climb the escalation ladder. The frontline NATO states, Poland, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, Romania, are now operating within range of Russia's forward deployed systems. Their capitals are demanding action from Washington, not reassurances, hard power, additional air defense systems, missile shields, troop deployments. But here's the trap. Every American system moved closer to Russia's border will be interpreted by Moscow not as defensive, but as preparation for offensive operations. That perception triggers Russian countermoves, which force American reactions, creating an escalation spiral where neither side wants war, but both sides are creating conditions that make war increasingly likely. This is the security dilemma in its purest, most dangerous form. The inherent tragedy of great power rivalry. Actions taken for defensive purposes appear threatening to the other side, generating responses that increase insecurity for everyone, and Russia's maneuver just accelerated this dynamic dramatically. From Moscow's perspective, this wasn't optional. It was strategic necessity. The Kremlin believes it cannot survive in a Europe dominated entirely by NATO. From Washington's perspective, this move destroys the predictability that underpins nuclear stability. When predictability collapses, the probability of catastrophic miscalculation spikes. What Western observers consistently miss is this: Russia doesn't see itself as losing, it sees itself as adapting. Moscow views every military adjustment as a necessary countermeasure to prevent strategic defeat. This is the survival instinct of a cornered great power. And cornered nuclear powers are the most dangerous actors in international politics. The United States must now perform an agonizing calibration. Washington cannot ignore this challenge without appearing weak. But overreacting risks triggering the exact crisis we're trying to prevent. The objective is to maintain deterrence without crossing the invisible threshold that provokes even more aggressive Russian action. This is a high wire act American leadership hasn't had to perform in decades, and the margin for error is essentially zero. Russia has demonstrated it's willing to expand operations beyond Ukraine's borders. It's proven that Western intelligence severely underestimated its strategic capabilities. The message to Washington is crystal clear: Moscow will not accept strategic defeat. Apply pressure, and they escalate. Attempt containment, and they expand their reach. Present a threat, and they'll maneuver in ways that paralyze American decision making. We've entered a new phase of this confrontation, one where the battlefield isn't confined by geography, one where the stakes transcend regional politics, one where both sides are creating conditions for miscalculation that could spiral beyond anyone's control. Russia pulled a lever nobody expected, and now the United States must reckon with a far more dangerous reality than anyone in Washington was prepared to handle. This isn't the end of the story. It's just the opening move in a game that's about to get far more dangerous than anything we've seen since the Cold War ended.